I don't care how good you are in this industry. You will absolutely fail. You will falter. You will have bad days. My first 5 phone calls every day as a CEO are probably my worst until I get into a rhythm and a groove, and it happens. And so often no one wants to admit that you're not perfect. No, like you're not.
You are listening to the Higher Ed Podcast. We uncover the future of higher education, current trends, insights from the sector's brightest, and actionable advice for leaders and executives. Creating impactful universities, well-branded colleges, and best-in-class student experiences. Join us as we redefine the sector one episode at a time.
Shannon, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, well, first and foremost, let me thank both of you. It's an honor to be on. Secondly, my name is Shannon Yerkic. I'm the CEO of True Mantra Education. My background is both with domestic and international proprietary and supplemental education. I've held numerous executive roles previously with multiple accrediting agencies, had a school of excellence with ACCSC, have operated in the wellness, allied health, allied trade industries, as well as also traditional as well. Predominantly, I know the focus of today's conversation is going to be really how communication theory impacts not only the industry, but also the campuses and how it can move the needle with your P&L, profitability, and really revenue generation and retention. So, with that being said, I think the biggest element that we can look at, and I think it's really unique in today's market, because if you look at gainful employment and you look specifically at where we are as an industry with COVID right now, stretching every dollar, really working the impact and the influx that we've seen with the lead generation, SEO, PPC, it's more important than ever not only to attract candidates and the right type of candidates, but also hold them. And really what we're going to talk about and really what I'm going to advocate today works not only in the industry element, but also the professional development and also in your personal life, because the same skill sets apply whether you're talking in admission rooms, career services, the financial aid, the education sector, or even with your employee personal development and personal lives. So I'm really excited to be a part of it and glad that we've had this forum to discuss it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm familiar with, first responders, right, Shannon? And, during this pandemic, my fiance is a nurse and she is deemed essential. I'm not, right? So I've been home a lot, working from the home office and things like that. So when I think of, responders, I think of kind of first responders, firemen, policemen. But when you talk about passive and active responders in higher ed, you just unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by that? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, I think it's amazing you said that, because actually what drew me into this industry, out of college, I worked in healthcare. And the reason I'm such an advocate, I'm passionate about proprietary education, was we hired so many candidates from institutions that we service because traditional ed couldn't serve the market as quickly as the proprietary with the graduation cycles and the enrollment cycles. And so often, especially in the allied trade or in nursing, the concept is, sometimes you have to you have to hurt to help or help to hurt. And what I mean by that is sometimes you have to be very honest, very direct, and you have to be very kind of passionate about what you do. And when I'm talking about responders, our market and what really thrives our market is we know our demographic almost better than anybody else in the sector. Meaning we know that by and large, traditionally, our student demographic is age range is predominantly 27 to 32. Of that, predominantly a single parent, whether male or female. And of that, the industry studies indicate that our demographic has 3 times the risk factors of traditional education. So we're dealing with students that by and large come to us that maybe they've been out of school 5, 10, 15 years. Maybe they know they need to go back to school, but they don't want to. Maybe they sit back and they think to themselves every day, I want to make a change. I need that foundation for my family, my future, but I really don't know how to do it. And then they go and they look at options. And the difference between our demographic and what the studies indicate is that by and large, we don't recruit our candidates the same way as traditional ed, where someone will go to a registrar's office, walk a campus, and then end up in the classroom. for us, they've been thinking about maybe going to school 16 to 18 months before they ever privately and personally inputted that sensitive information into a computer. And when you think about that, that's alarming, because we have a student that by and large could come to us, complete our programs twice over before they ever engage us for any type of interest or information. And I think it's relevant because when you look at the passive responders, and what I mean by that is I'm very much an A-level active responder. I'm an impulse buyer, meaning like the worst part, and my wife will always heckle me, when I go to the grocery store and I'm standing in between the lines to check out and I have items to my left and my right, I can be seduced and seducted into grabbing anything, a magazine, a candy bar, a can of Coke. It doesn't matter, because I'm impulsive. I like it in the moment and I put it down. It's tangible. I get the self-gratification. Unfortunately, in education, that tangible item is intangible. They can't see it. There's no value behind it unless we provide it. And so in so many sense, I'm from an active responder, I'm terrible sometimes for our industry, because if we only recruited those candidates into our programs, I'd rush to commit, and then I would never follow through because my interest would die. I would ultimately, I would be disconnected, disenfranchised, and then I would, ultimately weed myself out, and then refunds would be triggered, and it impacts retention, which ultimately impacts compliance. So why is it so important to really captivate and capture the passive responder? Because what we know about the passive responders is that they come to us, they're much more harder to obtain. They basically, as an active responder, I always say, I use the analogy like on like Black Friday, when everyone goes shopping, and if you go out and I was to see a discount and I was to go up to the register and I would be rung up full price, but I would look and see that there was a sale sign, I would confront confrontation and I would ask for the discount to be applied. Passive responders would not do that. So by and large, when I'm talking about passive responders, I'm talking about an individual that looks at a situation that gets recruited or compels themselves in different forms. They don't want to pick up the phone. They would rather input their private, sensitive, personal information and wait 2 to 3 days for us to contact them rather than them to contact us immediately to get the answers. Me personally, if I want to know something, I'll get on the phone, I'll engage, I'll force confrontation, even if it's uncomfortable, to get the information I desire. But what we know about our students is that they won't do that, the majority of them, and they wait for us to engage them. And then once we engage them, the real difficult element comes into play is how do we captivate them? How do we capture them? How do we get them to commit to something? Because they're the hardest to commit. But once they commit, they are the strongest in converting and staying and retaining and completing. Because there's one thing I'll say about our education that I'm a big advocate of. It has beneficial capabilities. The best thing about our educations, whether you're dealing with wellness, with allied health, allied trade, is that a student that completes their program, we know Department of Labor statistics indicate over a lifetime will have a higher earning potential than those that don't. So the real goal is how do we take candidates that maybe weren't the greatest artisterians of their time and get them to re-engage and go back to school and really come into it. So from a passive responder standpoint, to really kind of to isolate it, I'm talking about a student that it really is more nonverbal in their reactions. They do not like to engage. They are very much compelled to us through, social media, through SEO, through PPC. We engage them. They're not coming as walk-in or PDLs or referrals into our campuses, but they really can strew about 70% of our population. So knowing how to engage them, how to convert them, and really how to compel them forward is essential, not only to building your population, but also earning on your population. Because, and I'll say this all the time, even though we talk about proprietary education, and I know that so often in education, individuals are like, well, you can never use the word sales. And I always say this, at the end of the day, whether I'm advocating, motivating, inspiring, or encouraging a candidate, if I'm getting them to make a decision that they wouldn't want to do without assistance, you're selling them on that. You're getting them comfortable in doing something or going back to that. And so often when you talk about our admissions rooms, we deal with a lot of single parents. And a lot of times when you're talking to those single moms or single dads, and they're like, I don't know if I really can do this. I don't know if I can be successful at it. I always point back to their children. I say, listen, at the end of the day, was there ever an owner's manual? Did you ever get an owner's manual saying how to raise a child? And most of the times it's no, like I just figured it out. And I said, well, that's amazing because they're so great at being parents and figuring on the fly and overcoming obstacles and overcoming the issues that they forget that the majority of them have had, 15 to 18 years of experience in education before they ever hit our doorways. And how do I know that? Well, we know by ability to benefit or the restriction of it, unless you're in a pathway program under the previous gainful employment regulations, that our students are coming to us with high school credentialing to gain access to their, not only their funding, but their entry per accreditation into our programs. So the amazing thing here is if students can come to us with a background and getting them to realize that what we're talking about isn't foreign, isn't unique, isn't something they haven't had experience with, getting them comfortable with that is what the key element here is. Because when you remind a parent that, listen, your child, you never had an owner's manual, but your kid eats 3 times a day. They always get their exercise. They, you always look out for them. The worst thing that could happen in academia is you fail a test and you try again tomorrow. But here's the greatest thing. You've had that happen before. All of us in this room have maybe not scored as highly as we liked on a previous test, and we've overcome it and we've achieved it. And getting them really to understand and realize that the challenges they face is something that they've previously overcome, something they can overcome, and something they can build upon in that passive aspect. So, I'll let you jump in, but that's really when I'm talking about passive responders is what their demographic typically is like. We'll talk about like gender behind that, and then really the tendencies of those students to excel in certain areas.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Shannon. I mean, it's so much here to unpack. And I think I would agree with you here, right? Daniel Pink has a great book called To Sell is Human, right? And Henry Ford once said that if we would have asked them what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So, at some point, it's the salespeople that are kind of taking you to that next step, next generation. But, like you said, whatever words you want to use is great. Couple things you said that really stood out to me. The passive responder could wait 16 to 18 months, and they could have completed the program multiple times before they even take that first step. Mm-hmm. And George, I know you want to chime in here. What are you guys doing, or what's your thought process of helping them to respond sooner or to become more active?
Yeah, and I'll say that's a great question. And I think a lot of it has to do with knowing how to engage our candidates on the initial conversation. And it goes into, so often we want to engage and we want to talk and we don't want to listen, which really kind of goes into listening skills. We know, it's kind of like, Einstein's definition of insanity. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting change, you lose it. And the biggest thing with our admissions teams, and this is historically, is they don't change their approach. We have reps that are really good at converting one demographic and one type of students because they can relate best to them, when we really should step back and listen to each individual story. And what I would say is, by and large, with no matter if I was working consultatively with conglomerates previously, or the mom and pop small organizations, or the mid-level players that have regional visibility, is when you engage candidates, especially passive responders that come to us through those internet marketing app lead generation, PPC kind of lead sources, is engaging immediately within the first 15 to 20 seconds with a nice opening that does not sound anything historically like we would. Because most times it's, this is Shannon from, ASIS Massage Education, why did you request information? Well, the thing is, so often they didn't. And when you hit that back, the objection is, I didn't request information. Where'd you get it? Instead of saying and having a counter ready and very much available, listen to them, who may have went on your behalf today, a family member, a friend, a parent, a spouse, and who have you recently been talking to that maybe would have provided us that great information so we could have a conversation about your foundation for your future. And framing the question in a sense where it's open-ended and it's giving them an opportunity to really expel and expand their communication, their conversation. Because here's the one thing they realize: as a college, as a university, as an institution, when we reach out to a candidate, they're thinking in their head, oh, this is an interview. And the one thing it can never be is an interview. It's got to be a conversation. By and large, education historically has always been a hierarchy approach where it's like, prove to me why you belong. Well, we don't need to prove why they belong. If they're a parent, if they have a roof over their head, it's kind of like Maslow's theory of hierarchy. If they're surviving, to their credit,